Hello friends, this is Dave of JavaCodeJunkie.com and welcome to another JavaFX video tutorial. In this episode we're going to tackle the dialog control. A dialog in JavaFX wraps a dialog pane and provides the necessary application programming interface to present it to an end user. The dialog class is generic and has a single type R, which is used to represent the type of the result property, and also how to convert it from button type to result through the use of the result converter callback. So let's see how this works in actual code. As you can see, I've already created a new project, and in that project I also have a number of classes that I have created ahead of time. Otherwise this video will be extremely long. So I have created an application.css file, which I'm going to use at this point simply to increase the size of the font to make it easier to see on the screen. I have created a person class that's going to be used in conjunction with the dialog, and I've created a main class that has a button and a list view. I also have a person dialog, and at this point this is going to be the meat of what we're going to do in this video. So if I run the program right now, you'll see we have our button and our list view. What we're going to accomplish with this program is when we click the add button, we're going to be presented with a dialog that will allow us to add a new person to our list view. If we click now on the add button, nothing happens, as we haven't added any behavior to the button, and we also haven't added code to the dialog. All of the code for this project, as well as all of the other projects in this series, is available on GitHub, and as usual, I will leave a link to that in the description below. As a first step, let's go to our main class and code an event handler for our button. Add button. And I have this up above as a private instance variable, add button, new button, add person. So add button dot set on action, new event handler, action event, and then we'll add the unimplemented methods. There's only one, and it's the handle method, which is common to all JavaFX event handlers. In the event handler for the add button, we're going to instantiate a new person dialog. That person dialog we will code in just a little bit. But right now we're going to say dialog, person dialog equals new person dialog. And then I'm going to create an optional for the result, optional person, as person is the type of the object that will be returned from the dialog. Result equals person dialog dot show and wait. And then once we have the result, then we can process it. And what we're going to do is we're going to add it to our list view. If result dot is present, person equals result dot get list view dot get items dot add. We're going to add person dot get first name plus a space in between the first and the last name, and then the last name. Person dot get last name. Now if we run the program, we should be able to see a blank dialog when we click on the add person button. And there we have it. This is where we're actually going to add a grid with the first name and the last name text fields, and we're going to add a couple of buttons for OK and cancel. Let's close our program, and then let's get started on the person dialog. The class personDialog extends a dialog with a type of person, which reminds me, I think I forgot to do that over here. Yes, I did. The dialog is of type person because dialog is a generic type. Let's go back to personDialog. PersonDialog is a dialog and it returns a result of type person. In this personDialog, I have created 3 private instance variables. The first is of type person, which is the class that I created earlier. It is a Java object that contains 2 string properties. We're using string properties in this class so that we can use the bindings that are available through the string properties. I'm not going through setting up the inner workings of this class. It's very simple. And we've gone through this in prior lectures. In fact, I did a lecture completely on bindings. So what we have are 2 properties, one first name, one last name. And then we simply have the property getter, which returns the property. And we also have the getters and setters, which delegate to the property to get the value and to set the value. Let's first create a constructor for our personDialog. Public personDialog. And the personDialog I'm going to set up to expect an object of type person. Since we've extended the dialog class, the first thing I'm going to do is use the super keyword to invoke the constructor of the superclass, which is the dialog. Then I'm going to set a title on the dialog, this.setTitle, add person, and then I'm going to assign the person variable that's been passed as a parameter to the constructor to our private instance variable, this.person equals person. Next, I'm going to write 3 functions. The first I'm going to call buildUI. The second I'm going to call setPropertyBindings. And the third, setResultConverter. At this point, neither of these 3 methods exists. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the power of Eclipse to actually create these 3 methods for me. Let's now create the buildUI method. This is the method where we're going to create the content for our dialog. I've created a method called createGridPane. This is something that you should already know how to do, so I'm not going to go through it. It just creates a grid pane with a couple of text fields and a couple of labels. And we're going to add that to the dialog pane. So let's go back up to our buildUI function. We will start with pane equals create grid pane. Now we will assign that to the dialog pane. Since this class extends dialog, we don't need an object. The class is the object, so we will just simply say get dialog pane dot set content pane. Now at this point, I think we should be able to run the program and actually see something. And now we have an error to address in our main.java. The way I have set up the personDialog, we need a person object when we create the personDialog. So let's say new person null, because this is the new person that we're going to add to our list view. So let's run the program. We'll click Add Person, and now we get a dialog with 2 fields, first name and last name. Let's continue to enhance our dialog. Dialog, as with all other JavaFX controls, can be styled with CSS, so I'm going to add a style sheet for CSS styling. Get DialogPane, .get style sheets, .add, get class, .get resource, application.css, .to external form, .to external form. Next, I'm going to set a graphic for the header. Node image1 equals new image view, new image, get class dot get resource as stream, and the file that I'm going to use is dial.png, so that's in our application package /dial.png. Let's run and see what that looks like. Now that we've created the image, we can also add that to the graphic area of the dialog pane. Get dialog pane dot set graphic image 1. Let's run. Click add. Now we get to see the add person graphic. Close. You'll notice that that graphic is to the left of the dialog pane. Let's just change that now so we can move it to the header area. Get dialog pane dot set header image 1. And now let's run it again. This time it should be above the grid, which looks much better. So add person, and then we have the first name, last name labels, as well as the first name and last name text fields. We don't have any buttons as yet, so we continue to have to close it by using Eclipse, or terminate the program using Eclipse. Let's add some buttons to the dialog. Get dialog pane. Get button types. Add all, ButtonType, .ok, ButtonType.cancel. Run one more time. We have two buttons, the OK button and the cancel button. The OK button is the default button, and the cancel button is the default cancel operation. So we can hit the escape key to activate the cancel button and the enter key to activate the OK button. Let's add an event filter to the OK button. Button equals, and we're going to cast that to a button. Get dialog pane dot look up buttons dot look up button ButtonType dot OK. Button dot add event filter action event dot action new event handler, action event, we'll add the unimplemented method, which is the handle method. I'm going to write another method to actually validate the contents of the dialog pane, the grid pane. to ensure that we have data in both the first name and the last name fields. So here I'm going to say if not validate dialog event.consume. So if we don't have valid data in our grid for the two fields, then the consume method will prevent the dialog from closing. Now we have to actually write the validate dialog. And in the validate dialog method, if first name field dot get text dot is empty, bracket around that, or last name field dot get text dot is empty, I'm going to say return false, otherwise return true. Change this to dot action. Let's see, let's set property bindings. So when we create a person dialog, we have to pass in a person object. And what I'm going to do is bind the text fields that are in our grid to the text properties of our first name and last name fields. So first name field dot text property, which is the property that we're going to bind, dot bind bidirectional. We're going to bind that to the person dot first name property. And this is the reason that we created two string properties in the person object, so we could use them in the binding. We'll do the same for the last name field. I'll just copy and paste and change first to last, and we'll bind it to the last name property. Spell last properly, no errors. Now go back to our main, and if instead of a null, and of course we can use this in addition to the add method, we can also use this as an edit, although we'd have to do some extra coding and some extra work to provide an edit graphic when we actually created the person dialog. So if in here instead of null I'd said, let's say Babe Ruth, and then we'll run. Now when I click add person, it should be edit person because I'm passing a person object that already has values, Babe Ruth. We click add person, and those two values, Babe and Ruth, should show up in our first name and last name fields because we've bound them together, the person and the two text fields, Babe and Ruth. So let's go back there. And when we run without the person, we'll just have a blank grid where we can enter values. Now, one of the last things that we need to do, in order to get a value back from the dialog, we have to figure out a way to create value for the person object based on a button click. And to do that, we're going to set what's known as a result converter, which does exactly what we just talked about. So we'll do result converter, callback, ButtonType, person result converter, equals new callback, ButtonType, person, we'll add the unimplemented method, And here we enter code to decide if the button type OK is the one that's pressed, then we'll return a person, else we'll return a null value. If param equals button type dot OK, return person, else return null. And then we will set the result converter to this person result converter that we just created. Person result converter. Let's run it now and see if this works. We're going to add a person. Let's pick Babe Ruth. We click OK, and if everything's been coded properly, we should have Babe Ruth now in our list view. Right, we'll add another person, Lou Gehrig. Click OK, and Lou has been added. Yogi Berra. Click OK. You get the idea. There's one other thing that I want to show you in relation to a dialog in JavaFX. The dialog can also have an expandable content area. So I'm going to go back to the build UI. Get DialogPane. .expandable content property. .set. New label. This is the expandable content area. And then I'm going to set the value of the expanded property to true. Get DialogPane.set expanded to true. We'll run one more time. Click Add Person. And now we have an area here that we can use for whatever we like. This is the expandable content area. This allows you to hide that area and or show it depending on the current value, whether it's expanded or not expanded. If you enjoyed today's video, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss any content when I release new videos. Thanks again for hanging out with me today. It's appreciated as always, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, please stay safe and keep on coding.